TopMedTalk. Monty Mython here. Welcome to this podcast from TopMedTalk in association with Macmillan Trust. If you've been diagnosed with cancer, this series of podcasts, released during the COVID crisis of 2020, will help you think about what you can do to help yourself while you wait for treatment.
Nick Majerison here. Welcome to TopMedTalk. And on today's TopMedTalk, we're talking to Claire Shaw, consultant dietitian at the Royal Marsden NHS Foundation Trust. This podcast is about nutrition and prehabilitation. Eating well is a priority to maintain your health and your well-being. This podcast is going to focus on how to eat to keep well nourished. The information in this podcast is based on what we know about a healthy diet, but also tries to include information that people with cancer may want to ask about as regards what foods to eat. Claire, thanks for joining us. So how do you eat well to keep fit?
People often think of food as fuel for the body, so they think of energy and calories. And that is correct to some extent, but it also provides so much more. So if we think about parts of the diet such as protein, they're the building blocks of muscles, and the diet also provides vitamins and minerals to help the body function well. So it's not just about energy. People do know some of the messages about eating well to keep fit and well. Lots of people know they should be aiming for 5 portions of fruit and vegetables every day. But there are other important food groups that we mustn't forget. I mentioned protein earlier on. Mm-hmm. Protein is one of the food groups that provides the building blocks for muscles and proteins that have a particular job to do, such as in the blood or the immune system.
Okay, well, whereabouts would I get protein from? What food would I eat?
So if you're a meat eater, you would get it from meat. Particularly a good source would be lean red meat. It also comes from chicken, fish, eggs, dairy products, including cheese and yogurt. Not everybody eats meat. Vegetable sources might include beans, pulses, nuts, seeds. Soy products are a bit more popular now, including foods such as tofu. So there's a very broad range of foods in the diet that would give you good sources of protein.
Okay, and is protein more important, do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we all need protein, but when people have got a diagnosis of cancer, there are thoughts that they should actually eat a bit more protein than usual, particularly having protein in their diet spread throughout the day. And particularly if people are exercising, protein is very important for muscle recovery. So eating protein around the time of exercising is good advice.
Okay. And of course, if you're expecting treatment for cancer at the moment, you'd be in the phase known as prehabilitation, where you're preparing for that.
That's right.
Procedure. Okay.
That's right. So the key messages there really are to eat well, to maintain exercise, so you're maintaining your muscle mass. And that's why we're putting a particular focus on protein around the time of prehabilitation.
Okay, what other foods should we be looking at?
So the other food groups people really should include in their diet include starchy carbohydrate foods. So those would be things like bread, potatoes, rice, pasta, noodles, breakfast cereals. They're particularly good if they're the whole grain varieties because they have more vitamins and minerals and some dietary fibre. And then some of the foods that I mentioned in the protein category, so things like beans and lentils, they have protein, but they also have starchy carbohydrates as well.
So tell us more about a balanced diet. What else should we be looking at? Moderate amounts of things.
We all need a bit of fat in our diet. So good fats would be things like olive oil, vegetable oils. People will also get fat in other foods that I've mentioned. So things like meat, oily fish, eggs, and some of the dairy products. So fat is a very good source of energy or calories. So if people are losing weight, then foods that have got a bit more fat in them can be useful to help them prevent weight loss because it's a way of adding extra calories into the diet.
Now, it's an interesting thing you say there because as I'm thinking of diet, I'm thinking of people eating to lose weight, but I'm in the wrong category there, aren't I? If you're getting ready if you're getting ready for a serious operation or surgery or treatment for cancer, you're eating for different reasons, aren't you? It's not necessarily the case you're aiming to lose weight.
That's absolutely correct. And our advice would generally be that if people, even if they're overweight, This is not the time to be losing weight unless they've specifically been advised that by a doctor and they're under the care of a dietitian. So even if they're overweight, we're talking about eating well to stay well. We're not talking about people dieting to lose weight. We know that if people lose weight before or during cancer treatment, that can have a negative impact on how well they cope with the treatment. So we're not really wanting people to lose weight just before they start or during cancer treatment.
Okay, so weight loss is not helpful, but healthy eating is. Okay, so on healthy eating, and I guess on weight loss, what about these kind of high sugar, high fat foods? Are we still allowed them, or how does that work?
Well, I think everybody needs a treat, don't they? Particularly at the moment when we're shut away. But there should be a treat rather than a main part of the diet. So absolutely include them, but as a bit of an extra and a bit of a feel-good food. Or if people are actually losing weight, then they might need to think about these types of foods a little bit more often to try and help get the energy, the calories in.
Okay, so we've done eating. What about drinking? Yeah. What should we be doing?
Well, fluid intake's really, really important, and we touched a little bit on encouraging people to exercise. So drinking is obviously important on a daily basis, but also if you're exercising, you might need to take a bit more fluid if you're sweating. The good guide is to think about 8 to 10 cups or glasses of fluid every day. Doesn't have to all be water. Sometimes people get a little bit confused as to whether it has to be water. It can be other fluids such as tea, coffee, fruit and herbal teas, milk, fruit juices. They all count towards your fluid intake for the day.
Right, okay. So as I head towards my treatment, as I head through this period, how is it best for me to monitor my diet and keep a track of all of this? So
if we think about monitoring food intake in the first instance, I would really encourage people to plan their meals and think about that. You know, if they can't get out shopping and they're going to have to give somebody a list of foods to buy, think about what they're going to eat over the next few days, and bearing in mind the conversation we've just had about making sure those meals include protein, starchy carbohydrate foods, fruit and vegetables, and then an occasional treat to help bring up the calories. I would also encourage people to try and stick to a routine. You know, it's quite hard, isn't it, when you haven't got anything else to punctuate your day, but having those 3 meals a day, if people need a bit extra, then maybe 1 or 2 snacks in between. That helps you stick to a routine and helps you really guide what you're doing and planning with your meals.
The way I understand it from the work I've done here at TopMedTalk is if you're involved in prehabilitation, it's often good to think of yourself as part of a team of people who are treating you and maybe making this part of your treatment, the regular planning you're talking about.
Absolutely. I think, you know, to have a clear guide as to what you're aiming for is a great motivator. And one of the things I often do when I'm speaking to people is really help them come up with a plan that works for them. A lot of people are very capable of doing that for themselves. They know what suits them, they know what they like, but mapping it out, I think, over the days and weeks is really, really helpful. So they know what they're aiming for. I absolutely agree. And that's all part of the team that people need to support them.
Now, I guess also part of this planning process is going to involve how you do your shopping and what you get.
Yeah, it's a little bit unpredictable at the moment, whether you're going to be able to get all the things, all the food items that you want. Thinking about store cupboard items is really important, and foods that can be kept in the freezer if you've got capacity to keep foods in the freezer. They can be just as nutritious. So it's not that you have to have everything as fresh food. So frozen vegetables and fruit, they're also very good. They're frozen at a time when vitamin levels are high. Also, tinned fruit and vegetables can also be very, very useful and nutritious. So it's making use of your store cupboard, planning meals ahead, and planning if somebody's going to help you with the shopping, not leaving it up to them, because they may well choose foods that you don't really like.
So how would you know that you were eating enough, that you were doing the right thing here?
Yeah. One of the things I would encourage people to do is perhaps if they've got scales, is to weigh themselves occasionally, just to check whether they are managing to maintain their weight. We discussed that earlier. This is often about not losing weight. It's about maintaining their weight. So once a week is probably enough if you have got scales. And that gives a bit of a guide. If people see that they're losing some weight, then that might be an opportunity to think about perhaps some extra snacks between meals, or maybe even having a dessert on a regular basis, either lunch or evening meal, just to try and get some extra calories, some extra energy in.
What about supplements? What's the situation with extra supplements, vitamins, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, if you can manage to eat well, you should be able to get all the vitamins and minerals you need from your diet. But in these difficult times where people are inside a lot more, there is perhaps one nutrient we should particularly be thinking about, and that's vitamin D. So you're probably aware when the summer months come, all of us get some vitamin D from sunlight. Vitamin D is also in foods, but in the summer months, we get a top up from being out in the sun. But of course, at the moment, people are inside. So it's unlikely they're going to be getting sufficient exposure from sunlight. So it might be, if you're one of those people who's not going out, then thinking about a low-dose vitamin D supplement. And by that, I would mean for an adult, that's about 10 micrograms of vitamin D. Vitamins and minerals you should be able to get from your varied diet. If you're not eating well for various reasons, then a 1-a-day multivitamin without high levels of any vitamins might be an alternative. You might feel you need to take something like that. There are also other dietary supplements available in the shops. Some of them are in liquid form and they're designed to supplement meals, and they're really aimed at people who are losing weight or really struggling to eat. And they can be bought in large supermarkets or pharmacists. And then I find my patients often ask me about the protein supplements that people use if they're going to the gym.
Yeah.
And because we talked about protein, people often say, oh, do I need to buy some of those protein supplements? And the answer is no, they don't. You can get enough protein from foods in your diet. And going back to the foods we talked about earlier, which were the meat, fish, chicken, eggs, the dairy foods such as cheese and yogurt and milk, and then the vegetable sources of protein, beans, pulses, nuts and seeds.
What about drinks? Are there any drinks that would help in this respect that we haven't mentioned yet?
Well, there are some high protein, high energy drinks around. A lot of these are powders that you make up with water or with milk. They tend to be like a milkshake type of drink. As I mentioned, some of them you can buy from big supermarkets or pharmacists. If you really need advice, then some of these drinks are available through your GP. And it may be that you need to ask for some guidance either from the GP or to be referred to a dietitian. How easy it will be to speak to a dietitian at the moment is debatable, but certainly there are some resources on the Macmillan website that would be able to guide you.
TopMedTalk.
Desiree Chappell here. Thanks for listening to TopMedTalk. If you've enjoyed this podcast and you're a medical professional, please check us out at TopMedTalk.com for more information. We bring cutting-edge research right to the ears of lifesavers and carers around the world. TopMedTalk.com for more information.